All right, what's happening, everybody? It's Scott, and I'm back. And I've been busy. I've been off of YouTube for a few weeks. The last video I did was the Pentax KP first impressions video. I haven't done a follow-up to it yet, so that'll come at some point. But in the meantime, Fujifilm Canada sent me this GFX50R medium format digital camera. If you've been a subscriber to the channel for a long time, you know that I had a GFX50S when that camera first came out, and they sent it to me with a bunch of lenses, and at the time I really didn't know what to do with it. There's just something about that camera that didn't click with me. Big motorcycles going by the studio right now. You know, the camera itself was fantastic, but the design of that camera just is very utilitarian and purposeful. It's not a very nice looking camera, and for me the controls on it were laid out in a way that wasn't really familiar to me. Now, I don't have a problem generally switching between systems. Like, I shoot Fujifilm and I shoot Pentax, and I've got a Sony DSLR, and I just sold a Canon compact camera. I've got a bunch of film cameras there. Everything you shoot, you're just taking pictures with it. So to figure out how to operate each camera, I mean, it shouldn't take long, but I found the 50S really clunky and awkward and ugly, and it just wasn't an enjoyable camera to use. Sure, the files that came out of it were stunning. The 50 megapixel medium format files, the raw files, like the dynamic range. I've never seen dynamic range like that in my life. And but something about that camera didn't click with me. So when the 50R came out and it was like a familiar shape and look and control layout, I knew that I was going to have to get my hands on one, and Fujifilm was nice enough to send this to me. I only wanted one lens this time to sort of simplify my workflow in this review. So I've got the 45mm f2.8, which in 35mm equivalent would be a 35mm f2. First of all, the design of this camera, it is very, very familiar to anyone who's ever shot with a Fujifilm X series mirrorless camera, except it's just big. To me, it's almost identical to the XE3, right down to the elimination of the D-pad, replaced with this joystick. It's got a touch screen. Unlike the XE3, this screen is articulating. It's got shutter speed dial on the top, exposure comp dial, a customizable dial around the shutter button, which normally would be the off-on switch on an X series camera, but that's just moved to the side here. I have this set for ISO, so it's a nice little setup. On the back, it's got, like I said, it's got that joystick. It's got all your regular buttons, but it's also got, let's count them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a big truck. I live on a busy street. I don't know if you guys have figured that out. It's got 5 blank customizable buttons that you can set for really whatever you want, and that is fantastic. So let's quickly talk about the size of this camera. So being medium format, obviously the sensor itself is really big, and that's why you get a medium format camera, because you want that big sensor, you want all that dynamic range. So if you were to compare it to an X100, I mean, I don't know, it's not really that. Okay, well, I mean, it's a lot bigger. Let me get my hand out of the way here and you can see it. It's almost like the crop size applies to the body as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's 1 point whatever times bigger than a regular camera. So if you compare it to a digital SLR like this Pentax KP, height-wise, I mean, they're pretty close. It's really in the width. Oops, I just turned that on. It's in the width where you see like the big difference in size. And then this has a 50mm 1.8. This has got the 45 2.8, and you can see that it's substantially bigger. But that being said, this to me, when I'm out shooting with it, doesn't feel like a big camera. It feels like, I don't know, I'm having trouble comparing it to anything else I've shot with size-wise. Maybe something like an old Minolta SRT 102 film SLR, which were kind of big and heavy. Very similar to that, but ergonomically, it's much more familiar and easy for me to get around. I have to say, I've only shot, I think, 2 kind of full days with this camera so far, and it's been great. I find it sort of not cumbersome at all to have such a big camera with me, especially just carrying the one lens. I'll just throw the strap around my shoulder and walk around with it. It is not a stealthy camera by any means, and especially for doing street photography, you know, when you're out shooting like this and it's basically this big brick in front of your face, like, people are going to know what's happening. People are going to know that you're taking their picture, and there's been a couple of incidents, I will say, that I've never had with any other camera before, of people shouting loudly that they don't want their picture taken. I want to touch quickly on the battery. It's quite a large battery. It is the NP-T125. Now, I understand that milliamp hours wise, it's roughly the same as the standard Fujifilm X series battery, even though it is quite a bit smaller, or quite a bit larger, sorry. But the watts that come out of it are quite a bit higher to power this camera. Obviously the sensor and sort of everything about it needs more power. Now, that being said, I found the battery performance of this camera to be very poor. I think I got about 150 shots in over the couple of days that I was using it last weekend, and the battery was almost dead, which that's not a lot. I did have the camera on. I don't shut it off, so it stays on standby, which I don't know if that drains a lot more battery. Everything does shut down and then it fires up when you half press the shutter, but it definitely, the battery performance was probably the most disappointing thing of my first impressions of this camera. I don't think these batteries are cheap either, which I haven't looked to see if there's third-party ones. I mean, I shoot with third-party NPW126s all the time, and I've never had an issue, but I don't know if I would shoot third-party batteries in this expensive of a camera. It's tough to say, but the battery performance is definitely not one of the strong suits of this camera by any means. But man, when you see the files that come off of this massive sensor, all is forgiven. The dynamic range is unbelievable. When you see complete blackness in the shadows, like just black shadows, there's nothing there. You can pull back so much detail that, especially in the raw files, that it's phenomenal. Like, I can't stress how good these files are out of this medium format digital camera. I've heard a lot of people complain about the autofocus on this camera. I have to say I've had no issues with it at all, and it's, to me, sort of equivalent to maybe a first generation X series camera, but like a later first generation. Do you know what I mean? Like an XT1 or an XT10. I find the single point autofocus, which is generally all I would shoot with something like this, the single point non-continuous autofocus worked exceptionally well. Better than I think I remember it working on the 50S. I feel like they've made some improvements. It's essentially got all the same stuff under the hood as that camera. The fact that Fujifilm has sort of said, we're doing APS-C, we're not worried about full frame, and we've got medium format for anybody that wants a bigger sensor and wants that dynamic range. I get that philosophy, and I'm a big fan. So I have a hard time seeing the difference between a modern APS-C camera such as the XT3 or XT30, or Sony, the new Sony a6400, which is a very good camera, or the a6500. I have a hard time justifying that leap and the extra cost involved to full frame when the performance is so similar. This, on the other hand, if you're just simply looking for image quality, resolution, and dynamic range, it's really, really hard to beat this. Now, is something like a D850 or a 1DX Mark II, but like a full frame DSLR, are you going to get the same dynamic range, the same... Obviously you can find cameras with the same megapixel count. Megapixels aren't everything, but I mean, this has got them if that's what you're looking for. 50 megapixels is nothing to scoff at. And on this big of a sensor, it's a wonderful package. And I love this thing. I didn't think that I would. I had such a sort of lukewarm reaction to the 50S that I thought, well, I'll give this one a chance. It's just sort of a fancied up version of the S, put in a more familiar body, but that makes all the difference to me. All the shortcomings I found with the 50S, this design has addressed them for me ergonomically and sort of on an emotional level, like a connecting with the camera level. That's a big thing to me. If I have a camera that takes great pictures, but I don't enjoy using it, it doesn't make me feel a certain way. It doesn't matter how good the camera is, I'm just not going to get what I need out of it. And this camera definitely gives me exactly what I'm looking for and exactly what I expected from the Fujifilm medium format digital camera. Like I said, this is just a first impressions video, and I'm going to do a little slideshow here and show you guys some of the photos I took, so I'll be back in a sec after you see those. A couple things I've got on the go. I built a lomography constructor. My friend John gave this to me. I've actually got two of them, so I'm going to put some, I don't know, HP5 or something in these and go and test them out and let you know how they perform. And I got a new phone, and I don't really talk about phones on this channel, but the cameras on this phone, and I say cameras because it's got 4 of them, they're so good that I think I might actually do a review. This is the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, and think what you want about Huawei. They got a sort of a bad reputation, but if you do a little research on the company that makes iPhones, along with a lot of other companies that make a lot of the electronics in your home, or if you have a Facebook account, I don't think you need to worry about Huawei spying on you, if you catch my drift. But the cameras on this phone are outstanding, and I'm slightly uncomfortable with the over processing that goes on in this camera to make your photos look that good, because it sort of steps on my toes as a photographer a little bit, but it's great. This isn't a phone review. I'm going to do that in another video, but this was just a first impressions video of this camera, and I think I am going to take it to Disneyland on a trip we're going on in a couple of weeks. It's kind of a big camera to bring to a place like Disneyland, like if I want to go on rides and stuff, but it is weather sealed, and it's got 2 card slots in case I have any failures, which I don't think really hardly any of my other cameras do. I'm mostly a single card slot kind of guy. So first impressions, Fujifilm GFX50R. It's great. I think this is a real step in the right direction, in my opinion, for this medium format system, the GFX system. The 50S obviously has its place. Maybe it's more of a studio camera, and I feel like this is more of a studio camera as well, but it does function very well out in the wild, ergonomically and performance-wise. so that you can actually go out and shoot medium format digital camera just walking around, which is crazy for anybody that's ever shot with like a Pentax 645D or a Hasselblad with a digital back on it. Like, they're not just walking around cameras. Thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the comments you guys leave about my videos. They're predominantly positive, which is just nice. It's nice to hear nice things about the stuff that you make, and it just makes me feel good to interact with you guys and share my passion for the thing that I love, which is cameras and photography and making YouTube videos about them. All right, you guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.